What's going on, guys? This is another edition of Inside the Hatches Player Interview. I'm Jerome Jones, and I am privileged to interview none other than quarterback Baylin Trujillo. Me and the former USF and Orlando Predators quarterback will be talking about his time at USF, his time playing on Orlando Predators, what it's like to play arena pro football, and his ventures of being a CEO of a corporation called BTru Quarterback Training, and to go out into the community and help young athletes work on their craft. All that and more in this two-part series. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. Let's get right into it. Awesome. So let's get right into the beginning of everything, with your high school career. You was a three-sport athlete, and tell me a little bit about that, because you did baseball, you did football. I forgot the other third. Basketball. There you go. So you did basketball as well. So tell me a little bit about how that was with you just growing up, doing so much, and, also still balancing high school and, your grades and things like that.
Yeah, man. So my dad, man, he at a very young age, he really worked at it with me. And, he saw something in me when I was like 4 years old, and he put me into t-ball, and it was three sports year round all the way till my senior year of high school. And, I first started in t-ball, and then 2 years later basketball, and then at the age of 7 started football. But I was training football at the age of 5, just throwing the football around my dad. I was around the game, and I knew I had a passion for it, but I started physically playing the sport at 7. My dad, he trained me. He was my trainer growing up, and, he played at the University of Central Florida, UCF. So I knew that at a young age, and, I always compared myself to him and always wanted to be like him and reach that level. It was tough, it would go from football right into basketball and then finish off in baseball. So, it was just like year round and nonstop. But I enjoyed it. I loved it. And I don't regret anything about it.
So you chose USF as a school. You had a whole bunch of schools, like you said, that was recruiting you. What kind of influence did your father have into, helping you out with that decision?
I transferred my senior year and was at Boone High School for the first 3 years. We mainly ran the ball like 99% of the time. So I had to make that decision. My dad sat me down and was like, look, I want you to, if football really means something to you, write down on a piece of paper, why you want to transfer. Like, why is this something that you're serious about, and football as a career? I literally wrote a 3-page essay. They said, okay, let's do it. So I ended up transferring to Oak Ridge and played there my senior year and did really well. Finished 5th in Central Florida, 3rd in the county in passing. And after that, I was getting a lot of attention through colleges. After signing day, I scheduled an official visit to Faulkner University in Alabama. And that morning, I'll never forget it. I woke up, I was getting dressed, and all of a sudden my phone started ringing, and it was a number I didn't recognize. And I'm just like, okay, this is weird. So I picked it up, and sure enough, he was like, hey, is this Baylin? I'm like, yes, sir. He goes, this is Peter Voss from the University of South Florida, quarterback coach. Are you committed anywhere? And I'm like, no, there's no way. He's like, man, look, we looked at your film as a staff. We just did. And, we need a quarterback in the room. And we feel like you're the guy, regardless of how amazing Faulkner University was going to be, which it was a great visit. We pretty much told the coaches at the end of it, like, hey, thank you for the opportunity, but we're going to be going to the University of South Florida. I'm like, man, this is where I want to be. It's close to home. It's also the rival of my dad's school. So, a little trash talk in there, but, I just felt comfortable there. And so I verbally committed right there on the spot, and then ended up going there and had an amazing year and a half there. And it was a crazy experience, and it was something I'll never forget. And that's ultimately why I chose USF.
You went to USF, play a year and a half there, and then you had to transfer because of some coaching changes and things like that. So you wound up going to Weber International. So tell me a little bit about your experience with USF, and then was there any coaches at Weber that made you go over there instead of a different program?
The day after the spring game, Coach Fitch was now the quarterback coach. They did a whole coaching rotation in spring of 2012. Coach Voss was the one that recruited me, so I didn't really know much about Coach Fitch. He was our offensive coordinator, but I didn't have that personal relationship with him. So when I got into the exit meeting, I'm sitting there and he's talking to me. He's like, yeah, you had a great spring. We like what you're doing. You have a lot of ability. Just keep working out, and then we'll see how it all plays out in the fall. I just didn't get that vibe like, hey, you're going to compete for the starting job. I knew BJ Daniels was the guy. There's no question about it. But I wanted to feel some type of like that he believed that, I can be the future of the program, and with time. And I just didn't feel that. I went to shoot some hoops at our rec right by the athletic building. And I was just like sitting there. I'm like, you know what? I have so much talent. Like, I'm not just going to sit and wait for an opportunity for injury or something like that. Like, I want to go out and play. I went online and I emailed 5 schools: Weber International University, Florida International University, FAU, Jacksonville University, and Middle Tennessee. And I just emailed those coaches that I had built relationships with through the recruiting process in high school. Within 5 minutes, no joke, the quarterback coach from Weber International was like, look, if you come to our school, full scholarship, we will get you on a visit right now. We need a quarterback. So, let's make this happen. He's like, but first we need you to get your release. So sure enough, dude, not even like an hour and a half later, after my exit meeting with Todd Fitch, I texted him. I said, can I meet you in your office for like 5 minutes? And he's like, sure. So I went into his office and I was like, hey coach, thank you for the opportunity to be at USF. It was one of the best, year and a half that I've ever had. But unfortunately, I have to ask for my release because, I want to play. And he's like, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yes, sir. And he's like, okay, no problem. So he talked to Coach Holtz, and sure enough, I got my release within like the next hour. And then I was able to talk to anybody I wanted to, and they scheduled an official visit the following weekend. I went up there, and I fell in love. They offered me a full academic and full athletic scholarship, which means I had a full scholarship pretty much to go play at Weber, and that's ultimately what I wanted. And so I committed right there on the spot. I grew up a lot at Weber. There was a time in my life at Weber where I grew up and I matured. I had to go through an experience like that. And that was when I tore my ACL. As soon as I got to Weber, and I ended up started the season and finished the season as a starter and did really well. At the end of my redshirt sophomore year, that spring of 2013, 3 days after my birthday, the last play of the spring game, it was like a 4th and 18. I threw a flat route. As soon as I threw it, I felt, I hit the ground, and sure enough, my whole leg went numb, and it was completely silent around the stadium. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And sure enough, in that moment, I realized this is what I needed. I needed to be humble, because at that time I was not living a Christian life. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was hanging out with people I shouldn't have been hanging out with, cheating on tests and doing all this craziness outside of what I know is right. The night before, I was actually praying, and I'm thinking like, God, I'm a child of yours. Show me that, I'm still a child. Like, I know you punish your children. So I'm thinking, man, like, I've been getting away with everything. And this is the night before the game. He talking about 180. I mean, I'm the last play, having a great time, and boom, tear my ACL. So I knew it was a God thing, and I took it like that, and I learned a lot about myself. I definitely got humbled. I went from having everything to nothing in one play. I went through a grueling rehab after surgery, and I was fully cleared, ready to go in 5.5 months. ACLs back then was a career-ending injury, and on top of that, now it's a guaranteed year of rehab, and I was fully cleared for contact and everything in 5 months. When I came back, it was a pretty interesting situation. The coach didn't really fully trust the healing process. I went into the head coach's office, and I was like, hey coach, like, I just want to see the field. Like, I just want to play. So he's like, we need help at free safety if you want to make the move. And I'm like, let's do it. I'm ready. My first game getting real good action at free safety was against Jacksonville University. And I got a pick six, 55 yards for a touchdown with a freaking knee brace on. Took it to the crib. I got a pick six, and I threw a touchdown in college. So I got more gratitude and satisfaction scoring a pick six than I ever have throwing the plenty of touchdowns and rushing touchdowns I ever had, because you're not supposed to score on defense. So to do that was a pretty cool experience. So that's kind of like my claim to fame. And then going into my senior year, I switched back to quarterback, and I was a part of the first team to ever win the Sun Conference Championship. And we did that my senior year. So I got a ring out of it, my first ever true ring that I was a part of and earned.
Great experience, great story. Let's get into the football side of things. Like you said, you play arena football. Tell us a little bit about that experience, how that was playing under those kind of lights and cameras around you a lot more than, the normal settings that you were in.
After I was done playing at Weber, I went straight into teaching and then quarterback training. And I started that back in January 2015. Started my own quarterback training business called BTru QB Training. Just blew up from there. So that became my passion, is training quarterbacks. I'm very, big on social media and how to use it to help market yourself. So that's what I did early. And so through that, my name was getting around Orlando, and there was a coach that had been following me called Terrence Hill, who was a semi-pro coach, had reached out to me and was like, I know a guy that's looking for a quarterback, and he's the head coach of the Central Florida Jaguars and Lakeland Pro Arena team. And he's like, look, I can make that contact and see what happens. I'm like, well, sure, coach. I mean, my passion is these kids, but if it happens, it happens. Not even like 2 or 3 minutes later, I get a call from the head coach, and he's like, hey man, like, look, we've been watching your videos and stuff on social media. Our quarterback just went down. We need one to finish the rest of the season, which was 2 games left. Are you interested in playing pro ball? And I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. So he faxed me over the contract, and so I signed on a Friday night, and my first game was the next day. My first pro arena experience was against the #1 team with an experienced team at that. And I'm 21, 22 years old, and I don't know nothing about arena. I'm just an outdoor guy. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this is completely different than what I'm used to. And what better way to get acclimated into the game than playing the best team in the dang league? That night was a pretty interesting night. I mean, my first drive, we drove all the way down. I'm thinking, man, this is actually a lot easier than I thought. And ended up throwing 2 touchdowns. And then all of a sudden, it just was downhill from there in that game. But, I felt pretty good. I mean, just overall as a team, we just weren't clicking. That experience was phenomenal. Now I'm comfortable, right? So now mentally I'm like, I can play this game. On the drive home from Fort Myers, I'm like, man, I could have done this or whatever. But the game I picked it up pretty fast. Through that experience, I got a call from a guy who runs a arena league up in Georgia, and was like, we're doing a Turkey Bowl All-Star game. You've just been invited based on your performance. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. Just in 1 game or 1.5 or 2 games, I'm getting invited to an arena All-Star game. Right after that happened, the team that I played against, my first ever pro game, Florida Tarpons, one of their coaches reached out to me and was like, hey, look, man, our quarterback, he's an 18-year veteran. We need someone to back him up. If you're interested, we want to see you in a private workout. We'll do it in Lakeland. And let's see what you got. After the private workout, they pretty much said, you're signed. Sure enough, after the season was over, I did some good things when I got in. It's funny, the crowd used to get hype when I get in, because I was a younger guy, more flashy, and Chris Walsh obviously was older and would just like to sit in the pocket. So I was ready to go. As soon as the season was over, they signed me to another contract for the next year, and I was going to be the starting quarterback there. Then, over the course of like 5 months of being with the team and practicing and stuff, I get a random call from the Orlando Predators, and they were going through their season, and they're like, hey, we want to sign you on a contract. We need a quarterback. Our situation's kind of up and down through injuries and performances. And I actually denied them. I said, no, I'm good. I signed a contract with the Tarpons. Wherever I am, I'm giving it my full all. I can care less. Even though at the time I was excited. I'm like, wow, my hometown team, wants me to play for them. I mean, that was crazy. But in that moment, I'm like, I got to go and do what's right. And I signed a contract, and I'm loyal. So I'm going to stay and play with the Tarpons. Not even 2 weeks later, right before our first ever game, because they had switched leagues to the league called the A-League, and the Tarpons ended up folding out of nowhere. And so with that being said, I literally called the owner right after that happened, like that same day. And I was like, look, I'm available now. This is a couple weeks later. And I'm like, if you guys are still looking for a quarterback, I'm available. And I think he respected what I did and was like, yeah, we'll come to practice tomorrow and we'll check you out. And then sure enough, they signed me that night, sent me the whole contract and everything. It was like, you were our guy. So ended up playing with the Predators and finished out the rest of the year, which was about 6 games left. And then unfortunately in the second to last game of the season, actually third to last game of the season, I ended up breaking my hand right before halftime against the Carolina Cobras, who was the #1 team at the time in the league. Finished the game on a broken hand, and then sure enough got x-rays on it, and it was completely broken on my pinky and my throwing hand, and it swelled up pretty bad after the game. It was black and blue, and they ended up cutting the other quarterback that right the next day without really talking to me. And sure enough, now we're in this quarterback controversy because they're looking for me to take over as a starter, and I'm now have a broken hand. I can't go. But man, playing arena is completely different. But I've been blessed to get acclimated in it pretty quickly and learn it, and play with some pretty powerful teams, and teams that are well respected. And what better way to if I never play again in my career with my hometown team and say I got to play for a professional arena team in Orlando and do that. So great experience being a pro athlete.